you. Would like to take this opportunity to introduce Dr. Tuishem Shimrah to all of you. He has done his MSc in botany from University of Delhi and a PhD from School of Environment Science from the same university. After that, he joined as an assistant professor at Hansraj College, University of Delhi. And presently, after that, he is presently assistant professor, senior scale at Guru Gobind Singh Indraprastha University at University School of Environment Management. He has vast experience in the area of ecosystem restoration. Especially his major focus is in Northeast India, especially cultural landscape. With this small introduction, I welcome you, Dr. Tuishem Shimrah, and hand over to you to start the session. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Kuman, for nice introduction. We have been associated during our PhD in Delhi University, so I could remember many good memories with him. And also, I have known Dr. Rida Chauhan also in JNU, if I'm not mistaken. I was also there in School of Environment Sciences in a project. So, in that aspect also, I know her, although we were not in close contact. And also, I have some friends in IGNOU, many friends in IGNOU. So I used to be associated with the IGNOU for a few years, and still this association is continuing. I'm very happy that I'm also invited to speak to the students of BG Diploma of Sustainability Sciences. Thank you. The topic which I'm given is ecosystem. And in this ecosystem, I would like to speak about the dynamics and management of ecosystem. I hope this is for 1 hour, right?
Yes.
Okay, that's good. Thank you. We also have a paper in ecosystem, ecology, and also restoration in our university. That is School of Environment Management, where we run 3 courses: MSc in Environment Management, MSc in Biodiversity and Conservation, and MSc in Natural Resource Management. So I'm happy that I'm also been invited for this lecture. Now, coming to this topic, as we all know, ecosystem. We have been talking about ecosystem. Nowadays, everybody talks about ecosystem. Even the politicians are very fond of saying this word, ecosystem. Political ecosystem, animal ecosystem, human ecosystem, plant ecosystem, forest ecosystem, pond ecosystem, aquatic, terrestrial, in whatever ways. Many people are speaking about ecosystem. And as a student of science, we need to really go a little bit deeper on the term ecosystem. We need to understand from scientific point of view. We need to know what are the technicalities, what are the things that are there in ecosystem. Then only we can confidently speak among others and differentiate ourselves that we are the students of ecosystem or ecology in that, or environment in that matter. Okay, is my slide moving? Yes. Before going into the ecosystem, let us just for recap of what we have learned in our preceding courses. That means in the high school, higher secondary school, and also in the colleges or undergraduate. Ecology, we study ecology as a subject, and we know that ecology is a scientific study of interactions among organisms and between organisms and their environments, or in other words, surroundings. So the term ecology was coined by Ernst Haeckel, American scientist, in 1869. This is just a recap of what we have been taught, or what we have learned in our preceding classes. Okay, we also have come across many terms such as atoms, molecules, cell, tissue, organs, body system, organism. That means you and me, organism. And then how organisms of the same kind or same species comprise the population, and then the population of different species make up the community, and then this community, various communities in interaction with other uh, other physical environment or abiotic or non-living entities make up the ecosystem. And then all these ecosystems, many ecosystems, claiming together to make the highest level, that means the biosphere, that means the space or the place or the area that has the support for the living system. So we have the highest level, that means biosphere, which consists of the earth, some level of atmosphere, and then the underground earth crust below the ground. That these three things combine together to form the biosphere. So we learned all these things in our previous classes. Now let us come to the ecosystem. And before moving ahead of ecosystem, let us little bit recap ourselves, or remind ourselves, or simply go back to our old memories. What is an ecosystem? Now, the ecosystem consists of two words. One is eco, and another is system. And as we have studied earlier, as I have shown in the previous slide, that means about the ecology, that means study of the surrounding. So the same way, eco remains the same, ecosystem. So here the system is added. So ecosystem means simply a system where there is interactions among all the components or between components. So that means there is a system. A system may be an area, a plot of land, a particular geographical area, delineating area. So within which there is an interaction. Now I'll go into how much area is this, how big, how small, what is the scale of this area. I'll go into that in the next coming slides. But just imagine there is a system, and within that system, the interaction is taking place. So, no organism or no living organism cannot live in isolation without their non-living environment, because the non-living component provides materials and energy for the survival of the living organisms. To live, to have a life, certain conditions are to be there. Without that, no life is possible. For example, living beings like you and me. What are the things that are required by you? There are list of things that are required. There are numerous things that are required. You cannot live in isolation, free of anything. Say for you, for me, we need oxygen. We need air. We need light to see. We need food for energy. We need energy, all kinds of things. So to live, we need certain things without which you and me cannot live, or any organism cannot live. So, in other words, to be a living system, there should be interactions between and among the biotic community and its environment to produce a stable system or unit, and which is known as ecosystem. So within that ecosystem, you need certain things, certain requirements, certain factors for you to make your life possible. And these factors, you are in constant interaction. You take oxygen, you take carbon, you give out carbon dioxide, you take food to get energy, and you produce it, you excrete it, and you grow it, you grow your body, you move, you spend the energy, again you take in energy. So that kind of weird interaction is always there in a system. So thus, an ecosystem is a system in which there is interaction between various components within it. So this constant interaction results in exchange of materials and energy in the ecosystem. So this system, through these interactions, various exchange of materials and energy takes place. You take energy, give out, again take it. So there is exchange, and that whatever you give out will be of use for another organism. So there is various, this all constant interaction within that system. So this term ecosystem was given by the great scientist, great ecologist called Arthur Tansley in the year 1935. What are the characteristics of ecosystem? Now we have come to the concept of ecosystem. We have now understood that ecosystem is a certain area or a particular system within which there is various interaction between living organism to another living organism, or one living organism with another non-living organism. So that kind of interactions, wherever there is within a space, within a particular system, that is ecosystem. So it has characteristics such as geographical area. It should have certain demarcation. The ecosystems are some of the components that constitute the biosphere, the complete assembly of the Earth's ecosystems. So ecosystems also include habitats, places where the plants and animals of an ecosystem live. So for example, say ants, they live in a treetop. That particular area where it moves and where it collects the food, where it interacts with other organisms, where it eats, wherever activities these ants are carrying out, that limit is the habitat, and that the whatever the area it can cover and interact with various other living as well as non-living entities, it is its geographical area, and this geographical area where the ants have that interaction is its ecosystem. So it has its geographical area. Now ecosystem is also functional. Ecosystem is something, although there are many components, there are many living organisms or species that are there in ecosystem, sometimes they behave as a single unit. All these interactions carried out by various components in the ecosystem give certain characteristic features as a result of the interaction. So this has a functional aspect. So ecosystems are functional systems comprising living and non-living components Within them are materials that interact and in so doing consume or transform energy and materials. These components and the interactions between them comprise the ecosystem structure as well as the function. So it has structure as the various components occupying different areas, different. I'll just talk that in later slides. Then also in functional, everybody is in constant interaction. Everything is in constant interaction. Now, third characteristic is the change. Now, these interactions will give rise to certain characteristic feature of that ecosystem, that particular ecosystem. But that is not an equilibrium. That will not remain when it attains certain characteristic feature as climax feature, the top level of ecosystem. Does not mean that that ecosystem will remain as such. It will change as per the constant state of pressure, push and pressure, constant interactions, and as a result, it will change. So it is very dynamic. Ecosystem is very dynamic. So they are in a constant state of change as a result of population dynamics of species within the ecosystem, dispersion of species across ecosystem boundaries. There are also some climatic changes, climatic factors that are also playing the role in ecosystem and many other factors. So we have many pressure, say human beings, anthropogenic pressure. That can also be one of the changing drivers for the ecosystem. So with ecosystem exposed to different kinds of the pressure, it will change. Now, just before going to this structure and functional aspect of ecosystem, one of the characteristics that is functional aspect and also changing dynamism of the ecosystem is that abiotic and biotic factors which are intertwined. Geographic location such as latitude and longitude determines abiotic factors such as temperature and climate, which in turn dictates or forces a certain type of ecosystem to exist. So this is one just example. For example, there is, say, geographic location. You cannot isolate this living beings, non-living beings separate. They are intertwined. Say, for example, in a very high altitude or latitude, say for mountain area, a very high mountain area. So in mountain area, the temperature will be different. Climatic conditions will be quite different as compared to the low elevation area. So this location, latitude and longitude of that particular ecosystem will have particular abiotic factor, temperature. You cannot expect the mountain of, say, Nanda Devi Biosphere Reserve as very hot area or Himalayan range. So very high altitude area will have certain abiotic conditions, and in turn these conditions will allow certain biological components to exist, those plants or animals which can tolerate that kind of abiotic conditions can survive. So that means very cool, very cold conditions force the living components. Force the living components to exist. What kind of living or plants or animal which can tolerate that range of temperature. So These are the intertwined things in ecosystem. Such intertwined of abiotic and biotic factors are existing. Now, when we study ecology, ecology is a full subject, is a full branch of scientific discourse. Now, in ecology, what do you study? Now, in ecology, what we study is everything about the ecosystem. The kind of play that is taking place. It's just like a theater. That if you go to the movie hall, then what you see, what you experience, what you witness is whatever is there in the theater. So it's just like ecosystem is a theater in ecology. Whatever is there in the ecosystem, that is what you study. That is why in ecology, E.P. Autumn, you must have heard about this name. We read his books in our various levels of our education. E.P. Autumn's book, very famous book. E.P. Autumn referred ecosystem as the basic fundamental unit of ecology. So ecosystem is the fundamental unit of ecology in which we study whatever is taking place in ecosystem. Now, how, or to be more elaborate, there are certain fundamental aspects involved in ecosystem. Say we have the circulation, transportation, accumulation of energy, matter through the medium of living things and the activities. We have various activities. For example, we have photosynthesis, decomposition, herbivory, predation, parasitism, and other symbiotic activities that are among the principal biological processes responsible for the transport and storage of materials and energy. And the interactions of the organisms engaged in these activities provide the pathway for distribution of all the materials and energy. So this relationship between living and non-living components is referred to as the holosynosis in ecology. So the ecosystem stands as the basic unit of ecology. All these interactions, all this photosynthesis, decomposition, herbivory, all these things are taking place within a system, that is ecosystem, as a result of interaction of various components or various living organisms and its non-living counterparts. So the ecosystem stands as the basic unit of ecology, and which is one of the very important aspect in today's scientific discourse. Now, coming to the types of ecosystem. Broadly, ecosystem is categorized as terrestrial ecosystem, aquatic ecosystem. There are, of course, many within this. There are many ecosystems, but the general or simply the most common ecosystems that we deal with, we study, are terrestrial and aquatic ecosystem. So it may be small as oasis in a desert, or as big as an ocean spanning thousands of miles. So size varies. Dimension of size is huge. Now, in general, I'm not going into detail of these things, but simply for your information, I'm just giving you this different types of terrestrial ecosystem. So as you all know, terrestrial is the land-based ecosystems. So there are different types of terrestrial ecosystems distributed around various geological zones, such as forest ecosystems, grassland ecosystems, tundra ecosystems, desert ecosystems, such as I'm giving you some of the examples of the terrestrial ecosystem. And just imagine when I give you these examples, just imagine what are the components of this. For example, if you talk about forest ecosystem, just visualize what are the things that are there in a forest. What are the living components in a forest and non-living components in the forest. And different set of organisms will be present in grassland, in tundra, in desert, likewise. Say in iceberg, different forms of organisms will be there. So you have to visualize this. You have to know that what are the things, living organisms that are present as living component in that forest ecosystem, and what are the non-living components such as water, for example, air, soil, all these things are there in the forest ecosystem. Likewise, we can also list different species in grassland ecosystem along with the non-living components. So to be a little bit beyond this just example, the forest ecosystem, we have the forest ecosystem consists of several plants, animals, and microorganisms that live in coordination with the biotic factors of the environment. So this forest helps in maintaining the temperature of the earth and are the major carbon sink in the form of plant biomass. So just in nutshell, I'm giving you grassland ecosystem. In a grassland ecosystem, the vegetation is dominated by grasses because the name itself is grassland ecosystem. Although there will be some bushes and other small trees, shrubs. So we have the dominant vegetation is grassland, grasses and herbs. And the examples such as savanna grasslands are some of the examples of grassland ecosystems. Tundra ecosystems are devoid of trees and are found in cold climates or where rainfall is scarce. These are covered with snow for most of the year. The ecosystem in the Arctic or mountain tops is tundra system. Then desert ecosystem are found throughout the world. These are regions with very little rainfall. We have desert in Rajasthan, Gujarat. The days are hot and the nights are cold. These are the simple characteristic feature of the desert. So just example of some of the terrestrial ecosystem. We have aquatic ecosystem, that means ecosystem with water as the main medium. So aquatic ecosystems are ecosystems present in the body of water. This can be further divided into two types, namely freshwater ecosystem, marine ecosystem. So we have freshwater ecosystems such as we have the lakes, ponds, rivers, streams, and wetlands. These have no salt content in contrast with the marine ecosystem. So those who are coming from the sea coast area or the areas where you can easily go to the seas, you must have experienced the taste of marine water, that means ocean water. So we have the marine ecosystem. We have also the group of organisms that are different. So the fishes that are living in many of the fishes that are living in the freshwater cannot live in the marine ecosystem. So you can have different set of organisms, although they are of the same aquatic ecosystem. So freshwater ecosystem, the set of organisms will be quite different from that of the marine ecosystem. So marine ecosystem includes seas and oceans. These have a more substantial salt content and greater biodiversity in comparison to the freshwater ecosystem. So that two main types within the aquatic ecosystem. Now, coming to the structure of an ecosystem. Now, I have mentioned many times that ecosystem consists of biotic and abiotic components. So the structures are broadly divided into biotic components and abiotic components. Now, I'm not going into detail of various living organisms or non-living matters in biotic and abiotic components. You please think yourself, visualize, just take one example of forest, or just take one ecosystem as an example, and just you can make your own list, and then you can divide into different types. I'll go a little bit deeper in the next slide. Here, before going to the components of that, how big is an ecosystem? Now, densely defined ecosystem as a biotic community or assemblage and its associated physical environment in a specific place. Because Stanley wanted to emphasize the links between the biotic and the abiotic components of ecosystems, he chose the term from physics, that means system, that highlighted interactions. Furthermore, he represented both the biotic and abiotic components as complexes. Therefore, the main components of the concept are its abiotic and biotic features and the interactions between them, because the components of the ecosystems are themselves complexes within which there are interactions. A nested hierarchical structure is implied in the basic definition. So nested, as I have mentioned in my first slide, in my first preceding, the former slides, that as hierarchical structure or simply as a basic delineation of the system is required. Now this will indicate how big is the system and how small is the system. This will have the boundary of that system. Now size, for example. First, the scale is independent. It may be a forest stand, or for some organisms, a small patch of land with having microclimatic conditions, a shade area, or simply a huge deadlock, or simply a big tree. That itself may be an ecosystem. On the other hand, the whole landscape will be an ecosystem. So it depends on the kind of interaction. For some organism, the interaction is within that small area, whereas some organisms, they roam around different areas, crossing miles or kilometers. So the scale is independent. An ecosystem can be of any size so long as organisms, physical environment, and interactions can exist within it. So within that this area, so long as there is interaction within a small area, can be possible. Environmental factor of that area is different from the surrounding area, and that will be a factor for its interaction. Physical environment. So all this, depending on these physical environment interactions, the size of ecosystem is independent. Given this first characteristic, ecosystems can be as small as a patch of soil supporting plants and microbes, or as large as the entire biosphere of the earth. However, all instances of ecosystems have an explicit special extent. So it may be a forest stand as one ecosystem, just one forest stand, having characteristic feature of certain group of plants or trees. Or another ecosystem, maybe the whole watershed. So the whole watershed may be one ecosystem. And again, there will be landscape. The whole landscape may be an ecosystem. So size varies. Now, dynamics of ecosystem. As I have mentioned earlier, in ecosystem, it in very active state. It doesn't stay inactive. It is not something that does not change, or it is not something that activities are not going. It is not static. It is a dynamic system, free of narrow assumptions. It is not restricted to equilibrium. It does not attain. It does not something like that. It attains some stage and remain as such. So it is not restricted to equilibrium or complex or stable systems. In fact, ecosystems may be far from equilibrium, so that they are changing in composition, content, or the processing of nutrients and energy. So, similarly, ecosystems may be autotrophic, that means generating it within itself, by itself, or heterotrophic. They may be simple, such as those that contain only a few microbes and some detritus exported from elsewhere. Likewise, they may be fleeting, remaining in existence only a short time. Of course, the Earth abounds in persistence and complex ecosystems as well. So, in addition, ecosystems can include humans and their artifacts. So, see, ecosystems are very, very dynamic. Just imagine the kind of organisms that will be there in that system, and to sustain the life of numerous lives, numerous living organisms having different sets of environmental requirements. They are in constant action. They are in constant interaction among themselves, within themselves, and with the outside environment or with the other non-living objects. So in the process, the ecosystem is very, very dynamic. Now, how organisms are organized? The simplest level of organization in any ecosystem is that of an organism. Such many organisms belonging to the same species form a population. Many different populations that live in a particular area make up a community. The physical location of a community is the habitat, and such different communities interacting among or between themselves and also with physical environment forms the ecosystem. So the smallest unit that you study in an ecosystem is the single individual species or single individual organism. How an organism reacts, how an organism interact, how our organism behave in a particular area in a particular time in that system. So we study structure and function in ecosystem. Ecosystem has its structure and ecosystem has its function. In other words, ecosystem can be described in terms of its structure and also in terms of its function. So that means in ecosystem has certain visualization, certain image, certain area, certain you can understand as certain that you can have in your image, in your brain. It looks like appearance. Ecosystem has its own appearance, so you can say structure, you can visualize the structure. And also various activities that are taking place within that area. That is nothing but the function that you can study and you can describe. In the study of ecosystem, these two things are studied. These two things can be described to represent what is that ecosystem. So we have the structure of an ecosystem as its components. We have the main abiotic components and biotic components. We have within these biotic components, we have climate regime, etaphic, and then within that climate regime, we have the light, rainfall, temperature. Etaphic, we have the soil, minerals, and topography. And in the biotic components, we have autotrophs, that means those organisms that can manufacture their own food by themselves. And then we have the heterotrophs that depend on the autotrophs. So we have the heterotrophs, we have the saprotrophs and phagotrophs. So the structure of an ecosystem components, we can also describe in this way, that everything starts with the solar radiation. That means the origin of our energy comes from the sun. And then we have the producers such as plants, phytoplanktons, having the photosynthetic pigments, chlorophyll bearing organisms which can absorb the radiation from the sun, and with the chlorophyll it will convert this carbon and then carbon dioxide, and then giving you the oxygen and energy. So we have that kind of this structure: plant respiration, some energy escape, material input, and then we have the herbivores feed on the plants and phytoplanktons. So these are the heterotrophs. These are the producers, are the autotrophs. So producers and then consumers. We call it consumers of different levels: herbivores, carnivores, top carnivores, omnivores, different levels of the carnivores. And then we have the decomposers. When these things, carnivores or herbivores, die and decay, then these are the decomposers will act on them, and then that will be again converted into different other usable forms, complex molecules into simple usable forms, and that will be available for as a nutrients for the growth of the plants and other phytoplanktons. And so this will come or this will be represented in the form of a cycle. It can also move in the form of a cycle. So in structure of an ecosystem, we study food chain. That means food chain autotrophs, also known as producers, are photosynthetic plants. There are also chemotrophs. Apart from the photosynthetic plants, we have chemotrophs that are some bacteria, certain bacteria which can derive energy from chemical substances. And then we have the heterotrophs, also called as consumers, which are generally animals, herbivores, different levels of carnivores, also included in the heterotrophs. And then saprotrophs, also called as decomposers or reducers. That means they break down complex organic compounds of dead matter into simpler usable form of a nutrient. So we have such kind of arrangement of organisms. In this way, we have the such terrestrial food chain, marine food chain. In terrestrial food chain, we have the plants, herbivores, then carnivores. Again, carnivores, say for example, that the plants are there and plants are fed by the herbivores such as grasshoppers or rabbit or deer, cows, buffaloes, goats, sheep, or different types of herbivores. And these grasshoppers, this is given represented by grasshoppers, can be eaten by the carnivores, such as we have the mouse or rat, and if it is say cows or deer, or we have the fox or the tigers as carnivores. And this in turn, this rat can be consumed by the carnivore, the higher level of trophic, and then carnivore, this snake can also be consumed by the carnivores, such as we have the eagles. And on the marine food chain, we have primary producers such as phytoplanktons, small organisms, unicellular organisms, free-floating organisms, but having the photosynthetic pigment which can manufacture its own food, and then these are consumed by the zooplanktons, free-floating simple organisms belonging to the animal organisms, and these are smaller ones are consumed by the carnivores of bigger size of small fishes, and then again these small fishes will be consumed by the medium sized fishes, and then ultimately the largest fishes such as we have the whales, sharks, and this will consume upon the medium sized fishes. So we have different trophic level, that means food habit of the ecosystem, one ecosystem, so as marine food ecosystem. So this way you can describe the structure of ecosystem and how trophic are organized. Now this is simply the ideal or simply visualization of how you can describe it. But within this trophic level, there are many linkages within this. For example, eagle can eat both snake as well as this rat. And again, also grasshoppers. Eagles can also eat. Eagles can also feed on the grasshoppers. So in reality, it is not one-way traffic. In reality, it's not straight or a smooth one-way traffic. But in reality, this is something like this, food web. So ecosystem can also be described in a form of a food web as a structure. So a food web is a natural interconnection of the food chains and a graphical representation of what eats what in a particular ecosystem. Charles Eldon pioneered the concept of food cycles, food chains, and food size in his classical 1927 book, Animal Ecology. So this is how a person called Charles Eldon started working on this, visualizing the ecosystem, and he described ecosystem in a form of a food web. I'll have to speed up, I think. Again, ecosystem functions. Ecosystem can also be described in the form of its function. So major functional aspects of an ecosystem includes energy flow. That means there are various activities taking place in ecosystem. Energy flow is their production, decomposition, and nutrient cycling. So such activities are taking place in ecosystem. So energy flow means transfer of energy from one trophic level to the next trophic level, and it is always unidirectional, flowing from producers to top consumers. The main source of energy is radiant energy, as I have described in the structure of ecosystem. Only small, less than 3%, sometimes most of the time it is even less than 1%, is fixed in an ecosystem. Small portion of energy passes from one level to another. And this model was developed by Linderman in 1942, and he put forward the 10% law for the transfer of energy. That means maximum of 10% energy is transferred from one group of organism to another group of organism in the process of trophic, food habit. The remaining 90% gets lost in the atmosphere during respiration. So energy, and it follows the third law of thermodynamics, which says that energy can neither be created nor destroyed. It can change from one form to another. So 10% is, say, producers. Producers are consumed by the consumers, herbivores, say, let us say, first level of consumer. So much of the energy escape in death and decay, and also in the heat And again, decomposers, consumers are consumers of various stages. Also, this is the simplest model. So decomposers feed on the consumers, and this when decomposers die and decay, again inorganic nutrient, they are disintegrated further. So that means less and less energy. That means 10% of the energy is produced, pass on to consumers, and 10% of energy that consumers store in its body is transferred to the decomposer, and again decomposers also the energy also escape from the decomposers. So 10% law put forward by the Linderman. In the ecosystem, there is a lot of production. The amount of organic matter or biomass produced by an organism, by individual organisms in an ecosystem during given period of time is called productivity. The total amount of solar energy converted, that means fixed, into chemical energy by green plants is called gross primary production, GBP. Some amount of energy are lost in the process of respiration, and the remainder in the plant biomass is called net primary production. Again, another aspect of ecosystem where we can describe in a form of functional, that is decomposition. Decomposition is the physical and chemical breakdown of detritus or that organic matter which results in the release of carbon to the atmosphere and of nutrients in forms that can be used for plants and microbial production. Nutrient cycling, various nutrients are cycling in an ecosystem. Most studied and well documented, such as we have the sulfur, carbon, we have different types of the nitrogen cycle. All these are cycling in an ecosystem. So such activities are taking place in the ecosystem. So it involves lots of agents, lots of the factors that convert one form of organic or simply one form of matter into another form of matter. I'm not going into detail of this. Now, why do we study? Why should we know? And what is ecosystem a value to us? Why should we value so much about ecosystem? And why should we need to conserve it? Because ecosystem has various services. It provides lots of goods and services to human beings. So ecosystem, we call it as ecosystem services. What is ecosystem services? That means goods and services that human beings obtain from the ecosystem. That is called ecosystem services. And they are broadly divided into 4 types, such as provisioning service, regulating service, cultural service, supporting services. So all the goods and services, all the usefulness, the value of ecosystem to human beings are categorized into these 4 types. We get so many things from the ecosystem directly or indirectly. Some are in material, some are not physical form. There are many services. Some can be measured, some can be attached certain amount of rupees or some certain monetary value. This can be measured. We call it tangible services. And some services which you cannot measure it, you cannot fix certain price on it. We call it intangible services or intangible values. Many of the cultural services, such as spiritual and religious values, you cannot measure with your money. You cannot have that certain price in it. So ecosystem has that much importance for human beings. So any ecosystem, be it forest ecosystem, be it lake ecosystem, be it pond ecosystem, the kind of services, all the usefulness that the human beings obtain can be categorized into these four types. Provisioning of food, we get food, fiber, fuel, genetic resources, biochemicals, fresh water, we get directly from the ecosystem as provisioning. That means what ecosystem provides you directly. Regulating service, we have invasion resistance, herbivory, pollination, seed dispersal, climate regulation, pest regulation, disease regulation, natural hazard protection, erosion regulation, water purification. And in cultural services, we have numerous. And supporting services, we have the same, many services that ecosystem. So considering all this, we need to maintain, it is a prerogative of human beings to maintain and conserve ecosystem. So Earth as life supporter, Earth is the only planet that supports life of, as of now, the known life that are there in the planet is the Earth only. So in order to maintain sustainable supply of all these ecosystem services, we need to have a clear knowledge of management of this ecosystem. So we need to act for sustaining ecosystem. So the structure and function of ecosystem have been changed more rapidly in the second half of the 20th century. This is the area of concern. There are many negative impacts documented, such as climate change, global warming, invasive species, many things. Human using ecosystem services faster than what it can generate. So these are the concerns of our ecosystem. We are putting so much of pressure due to population, due to our competition to accumulate more wealth. We are using ecosystem faster than how it can generate. So management of ecosystem is a very important subject nowadays. So ecosystem functions are the result of assemblages of plants and animals interacting with each other and with the physical components of their environment. Ecosystem-based management is an attempt to regulate our use of ecosystems so that we can benefit from them while at the same time modifying our impacts on them so that basic ecosystem functions are preserved. So ecosystem functions have to be preserved, have to be made. We have to ensure that ecosystem functions are running smoothly so that we get all the services, goods as ecosystem services from that ecosystem. So we, just like a golden egg laid by the goose. As long as there is a goose, we'll get the golden egg. But if you keep the goose in a very bad shape, then it will not be in a position to lay eggs, golden egg. So in order to get golden eggs, you need to maintain the affairs of the golden, the goose. So ecosystem is that thing. You need to maintain. As long as you are keeping the ecosystem healthy, then the services that the ecosystem provides will be without any problem, without any discontinuation. So in order to have a sustained service of ecosystem, you need to conserve the ecosystem in a proper way. So we need to protect. Need for management. Protecting ecosystems provide multiple benefits, both directly through sustainable management of biological resources and indirectly through protection of ecosystem services. We have different services, social, economic, climate. Here also you can put into the ecosystem services. And I'm giving you certain examples. So we need to have institutional approach to ecosystem management. I'm giving just 2 slides just to just to give you as an example in how the traditional communities in Manipur are doing this. Just for example, you can just cite any examples in your area, in any state, in any community. Since I work in Manipur and in Northeast India, especially, I have done some certain works in this, just giving you one example of how institutions, traditional institutions, are managing the ecosystem sustainably. So we have the institutions are being changed from the traditional hetman or chief or king type. The tribal communities have their king, and now slowly it is being replaced by the council, development council, hetman chief to chairman or development council head, and they look after the land use change, land cover change. They are monitoring the kind of the use, how the villagers are using their village lands. Are they using sustainably or not? So that kind of changes are taking place. So institutional approach for management of ecosystem is taking place in the traditional communities in Manipur and in other states of Northeast India. So certain things, visible things that we came across are such as regulation of land use from village level. Villages are now regulating land use. They are allowing certain lands to be used for certain things. They prohibit the certain kinds of land use. So that kind of the regulation is there. Selling of agriculture area. So the farmers are permitted to use the village land for a specific area. There is a limit to the area. There are many villages where they set aside certain patch of land or landscape for natural regeneration, or just to just keep it as pristine forest where no activity is allowed. There are certain areas in the villages where they maintain the segregate groups. Certain set aside areas are there. So that kind of activities, that kind of practice are taking place in Northeast India. And also you have the MNREGA scheme where the farmers are given 100 days of employment guarantee. Manrega. So that the money that they have in the village, they use it for the promotion of the biodiversity conservation. That kind of activities they carry out, and regulate hunting collection of wild forests. Nowadays there was no regulation before, but such regulations are now being in existence. So that kind of just small, sudden, prominent, visible policy adaptations from the local communities in order to manage ecosystem can be seen in this part of India. So there are certain things that we also will have to change in order to conserve or to manage the ecosystem. We need to change our attitude that human beings are the masters of the universe. That kind of attitude should not be there. An ecosystem has to be given sufficient time and space to fully regenerate or recuperate. The same way we take care of our body, we cannot take some part of our body care and neglect other parts of the body. So any part of the body, if there is a defect, the ultimate victim is you, the whole body. So we take care of each and every part of our body. The same thing, ecosystem also should have to be taken equal care, be it any biodiversity, any form of living organism or non-living entity. We have to take care of all these things. The culture of consumerism needs to be avoided. We need to adapt eco-friendly attitudes. So these are the things that we need to adopt for the sustainable management of the ecosystem. So I leave you with that. Thank you so much.